Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Well. Prime Minister of Hungary, Mr. Viktor Orban, visits Kiev, Ukraine, and finally meets Mr. Zelensky on Ukrainian turf, not on Zelensky's turf, Ukrainian turf. Why does this happen? Well, Hungary assumed the presidency of the European Community, European Union, blah blah blah, and being in charge, it's mostly a symbolic position. Like, for instance, Secretary of NATO Stoltenberg is not making decisions; he's just coordinating things, and he's just a figurehead, shows up and talks and so on. The decision is made in other quarters. But Mr. Orban goes to Ukraine and tells Zelensky to accept, or urges, that's the word, urges Zelensky to accept Kremlin's ceasefire offer. Do you remember what it is? All right, I will tell you. So that is the first article. I actually have two of them related to this issue. The whole video is going to be dealing with Zelensky's ceasefire offer, who's who and what's what. The Americans stick their tail in that too, and we have the Blinken-Stein talking with Yermak-Stein, who Yermak-Stein is just, Kremlin's or the president's, the Ukrainian presidency's chief of staff. We're going to discuss that garbage as well, because I guarantee you, but I will provide you with the information, who is actually the chief of staff of the White House. You don't know that person. I almost guarantee you. And you don't know because he's not doing squat. But Mr. Yermak-Stein, who is the counterpart of the American White House Chief of Staff, does a lot of hanky-panky. Bypasses the foreign minister Kuleba, the round-headed guy. Why? Because they are in charge. Not Kuleba, not Sirski, not Zaluzny, not those guys. But Zmihal, Yermak, Reznikov, and then you have Zelensky-Stein. As we have Yellen, Mayorkas, Blinken, even the White House Chief of Staff is also Stein. So let me show you this article coming from the Telegraph. Orban urges Zelensky to accept Kremlin's ceasefire offer. What was Kremlin's ceasefire offer? Putin a few days ago said, well, we can stop the war, we can have a ceasefire if the Ukrainians got their troops out of the, as the Russians call it, their provinces, the Donbass and so on. Second, promises NATO alliance out, no NATO membership, denazification, obviously, and demilitarization. This is exactly how the Russians call it, the Russian military special military operation. That's why they entered, including defending the Russian people who live in East Ukraine that were slaughtered by the government tanks. Why? Because they did not agree with the coup organized in 2014 by All right, so we have here, Orban urges Zelensky. What do you think Zelensky does? Well, that's an offer that Zelensky could, and the United States of America, could grab and halfway save face. This is what Putin said during the interview with Tucker Carlson, if you remember. We gave the West, the Americans, so many options and so many ways to save face that they're losing in Ukraine, but they are still not knowing how to deal with it, because that would mean the end of the attempt to promote Pax, so-called Pax Americana. That is, an empire cannot show weaknesses, because if an empire shows weaknesses, the subjects will run away from the plantation. Viktor Orban has made a surprise visit to Kiev. The first visit, he got the presidency yesterday, and today he's in Kiev. That's how it was. To Kiev, where he urged Volodymyr Zelensky to accept the Kremlin's offer of a ceasefire. The Hungarian leader, Vladimir Putin's strongest EU ally, praised a Ukrainian organized peace summit in Switzerland last month and said that a ceasefire would speed up negotiations to end the war. And I'm quoting, I asked the president whether it was possible to take a break, to stop the firing. and then continue the negotiations. End quote. Mr. Orban told reporters, and I'm quoting, "After all, a ceasefire could ensure the speeding up of the pace of these negotiations, of the pace. I'm sorry, but the big banks want that. The American military-industrial complex wants that. The energy sector and interest in the West want that. They should have been asked, not, Zelensky. Zelensky is just a figurehead over there following orders. And when he's not going to be following orders anymore, he's going to be put to rest, which is, if he doesn't want to go willingly to London, Israel, or New York, then he's going to have an accident. That's how I foresee. Mr. Zelensky and his Western backers have described Putin's offer of a ceasefire as a trap. As a trap. Okay. That would give the Kremlin armies time to rest. I remember when these guys urged, and the Russian told Zelensky, hey, have a ceasefire for a day or two. And Zelensky said no, because they would give you time to recuperate. The Russians said the same thing at one point about these guys. It's just mistrust? Yeah, you bet. Both ways? Yes. Despite Hungary sharing a border with Ukraine, this was Mr. Orban's first trip to Kiev since 2012, of course. Now, Mr. Zelensky refused to discuss the war or the prospect of negotiations with Putin during the press conference after his talks with Mr. Orban. Instead, he obliquely described Hungary's commitment to, and I'm quoting, restoring real long-term security, and talked about their discussion on issues, and I'm quoting, that affect the lives of our people. Our people have a problem with Palestinians right now, Zelensky, so shut the fuck up. Next article. New Voice of Ukraine. Orban proposes ceasefire to expedite Ukraine-Russia talks. Russia's war against Ukraine significantly impacts European security, said Orban, noting Hungary's high regard for President Zelensky's peace initiatives. And I'm quoting, I told Mr. Zelensky that these initiatives take a lot of time, complicated by international diplomatic rules. He said, I urge Zelensky, and I'm quoting, to consider an alternative approach. First, ceasefire, then negotiate peace, as cessation of hostilities could accelerate these talks. Mr. Viktor Orban, the Hungarian Prime Minister, pragmatic and very, very much working for his Hungarian people. I wish the Romanians would have a Romanian Prime Minister or President doing the same for them. But instead, these guys, through us, it's a continuation. It's not that this guy did it on his own. Through us, in the hands of the plantation's master. But why? Because we have the boogeyman in the northeast. All right, let's go to the next article. And this comes from Reuters. Ukraine not ready to compromise with Russia, says Zelensky's aide. And who's Zelensky's aide? I will introduce him to you. And these conversations here, that's the guy in the middle. He looks like Mr. What's his name? Weinstein. You know Mr. Weinstein? Yeah, that's exactly, because they are kind of, belong to the same kind of... All right, so he participated in this peace. So, where have you seen this? In a peace process, in a peace summit, all the countries sent foreign ministers or presidents or people that really have power, right? According to what's written in their job description. But these guys sent Zelensky Stein and Yermak Stein. Yermak Stein is the chief of staff of Zelensky. No other chief of staff of any country that I know of participated in the so-called Switzerland Peace Summit. Why is that? Yermak plays the role of kind of he's bigger than Zelensky Stein or Zmihal Stein. And he is just the chief of staff. Now, do you know who is, let's say, in your country, who is the chief of staff of your president? I personally don't know in Romania. I don't even know in America, but I looked it for you. And this is the guy in the States of America. And yes, he's a Zelensky Stein, obviously. Right there, Mr. Zeiss. He is Jeff Zients. Zients? How you want to call it? This is the guy. So we got the chief of staff of the White House, Zelensky Stein. We have the foreign minister, Blinken Stein. We have Victoria Nuland Stein. We have what's her name, Treasury Department, Miss Yellen Stein. We got Mallorca's National Security, Stein. Just a coincidence. But if that would be a coincidence, I want to see where you find Romanians in, let's say, the US government. Or Hungarians, or Czechs, or balances. You will not find. Why? You can't say they're better. You cannot say that, because if you say that, that means you are trying to discriminate and you are a xenophobe and so on. Because we all perform the same under the same situation and environment and circumstances. So that is Mr. Yermak. And Mr. Yermak said, is not ready. He said that. When was the last time when you heard the US White House Chief of Staff, Mr. Jeff Zients, making any statements about the United States doesn't agree with this or that, with Iran or with North Korea or with Russia? Have you ever? You will never find that. Why? All right, so let's go back to this fat fuck here. And this article from Reuters is written by none other than Simon Lewis. You can make shit up. So Mr. Simon Lewis for Reuters write about Zelensky Stein and Yermak Stein about Ukraine and the Russians. So the Russians, the Ukrainians, and you got the guys who tell us what's going on and who do this and who does that. Ukraine is not ready, says Yermak Stein, to compromise with Russia and give up any territory to end the war. A senior Ukrainian official said on Tuesday when asked about US President candidate Donald Trump's declaration that he could quickly end the conflict. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's chief of staff, Andriy Yermak Stein, told reporters during a visit to Washington that Kiev would listen to any advice on how to achieve a just peace in the war. Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022. That's what Mr. Lewis, who wrote the article, stopped, but I will add, because Kiev sent tanks to kill people in Eastern Ukrainian, mind you, they call it Russian-speaking Ukrainians, in Donbass, who did not agree with the coup d'etat organized in 2014 by traitors. Because if you have a democratically elected government, as corrupt as they all are, and in this case Mr. Viktor Yanukovych, and you have people with weapons overthrowing that is not a legitimate government, and even not recognized by the so-called free world, democratic world, which recognized it overnight. So the guys in Donbass said, "Niet, we're not going to do that." Plus the implemented or Russophobic moves, cultural moves, language, newspapers, politicians that Kiev implemented as soon as these guys took office through the coup in 2014. That tells you the values of the Western free world. Now, move on. So, Yermak's visit in Washington, D.C. Next one. Reuters. This is from July 2nd, 2024. Blinken and top Zelensky aide discuss bringing Ukraine closer to NATO. So, Blinkenstein discussed with the same Yermak Stein, Zelensky aide, discuss bringing Ukraine closer to NATO. So, here is the picture of this Zelensky Stein right here, right? And he somehow discusses with Yermak. I know that foreign ministers talk with foreign minister, with counterparts. So Mr. Blinkenstein is a foreign minister. He is the Secretary of State. That is the foreign minister, like Lavrov. Sergei Lavrov is the foreign minister of Russia, or Mr. Jaishankar, Dr. Jaishankar, that I admire a lot, is the foreign minister of India, for instance, or Mr. Wang Yi of China, or Miss Baerbock, infantile, of Germany, and so on. But we have here Blinken talks to another Blinkenstein, which is Mr. Yermak Stein, and they are discussing bringing closer to NATO. Where is Kuleba? Kuleba is Ukraine's foreign minister. Where is he at? Is he still alive? Was he hanged? Was he cooperating with the Russians or something? Now, let me see. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and the Ukrainian President Chief of Staff Andriy Yermak Stein on Tuesday discussed NATO members' intention to bring Ukraine closer to the alliance. State Department Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel said. Why did they discuss among themselves? Now, let me show you. Here. Dmitry Kuleba, this is the foreign minister. This is the guy who, in a normal situation, the round-headed guy, would talk to Blinkenstein, not Yermak Stein, So what's going on here? And he is, let me read for you, he is Minister of Foreign Affairs incumbent. So he's not yet gone. But you got Mr. Yermakstein. All right? So here is the offer, ceasefire, and who decides the offer? Who decides that? Ukrainians. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.